Yesterday, I took my grandma to the hospital again, and we spent the afternoon, early evening up there. While we were there, they were going to rehook my grandfather up with a catheter, and some other bathroom stuff was going on, so he didn't want anybody in the room, obviously, and we didn't want to be in there. So we ventured off to this little consulting room down the hall and around the corner, and we hung out in there, and it was my mom, my aunt, my grandma, and me. And we were hoping that at some point the doctor would come in, because my mom and my aunt had thought that it had seemed like the day before, like the doctor was wanting to have more conversation with them without my grandfather present. But they were in the room with him, so that wasn't an option at that point in time. So we were able to have the doctor come into where we were, and it worked out well on that end. One of the things that he said was that my grandfather definitely wouldn't be here in a year. And how I took that to mean was, it's probably a lot sooner than that, but there's too many variables, and it's up in the air enough that he doesn't want to narrow down any more of a time frame. However, he had commented, I don't know if, I think he said it yesterday too, that about every time he's seen him, he's getting a little bit worse. And there was a possibility that came up at one point that he would have to have his pacemaker removed. And yesterday the doctor confirmed that that's not even on the table anymore, because he doesn't think he would make it at all through that. So at very least, there's at least another month of being treated for sepsis and all that exciting stuff. So he's got to be at least on antibiotics for at least another month. And where that is, I mean, there's a lot that plays into that. He did say that there would be no more of the cancer treatments. I think I might have mentioned that in another video. Everything runs together anymore. So spent the drive home with my grandma, obviously, and I mean, she's okay. It was just kind of, I mean, it's one of those things that it's, at this point, a matter of how long. So, you know, she always jumps into like the heaviest side of it, of course. But you know, she's talking about how they've had their funerals and the grave and everything paid for like over 20 years at this point, I think. Or around that point anyway. So she was trying to figure out what else there is to worry about. It's like, one thing at a time, cross the bridge when we get there, you know. And here, have a drink. She's gonna lick the seat, and then she don't want the drink. Anyway, yeah, so that was a thing. But then I got her home, and you know, put the wheelchair back in the garage in case whoever takes her to the hospital next isn't in that far. We leave it there, or try to remember to leave it there, just in case. Although hospital does have them, so there's that. But anyway, I get back home, and you know, had some pineapple, and was kind of just meandering around, got some laundry going, and went back and was in my office for a while. And I heard, like, my Borks, they're more chattery in the evening hours, and somehow it seemed kind of different, and I thought to go and look, and my male Bork was laying in the bottom of the cage dead. He was the oldest of the birds, and I think he was 7. And I mean, I knew potentially that could happen at any point, because I think that's their lifespan, from last I remember looking, was like between 5 and 8 years. So yeah, but his little female was up on one of the perches and kind of sounding very sad. And it's one of those things, it's like, obviously death has been at the forefront of my mind, I guess, on a lot of ends, because everything with my grandfather especially, and then I've talked about how I pulled those cards last year that seemed to suggest that, the card said, be mindful of what season you're in, and there were a series of animal deaths last year before we got to the human deaths at the beginning of the year, which was my uncle, and then a family friend, and then a former coworker, and then there have been some other people along the way, one of which was my mom's best friend's sister, also passed not too long ago. It was either August or September. So it's one of those things, like when the female cockatiel died the other day, it's kind of like one of those moments where it was like, oh shit, does this mean we're starting it again? And then now that there's another one that's gone, it's like, ugh. And it's kind of funny because Taz, quit licking. Because obviously death has been something that we've been thinking about. I've said for a long time that as my birds and reptiles die off, I'm done. I'm not getting any more. And I have one bearded dragon I think she's currently brumating again. And I've thought she was going to die many times. She's 9. And she's still hanging in there. She's kind of just plopped in the middle of the cage, and when I jostle her around, it takes like 5 minutes, but eventually she raises her head and like, what the hell are you on? It's like, oh, sorry. So wanted to know if I was supposed to bury you this time or not. So not for that one, but then the bird. And I think I told Ben this morning, it's like, I feel like I've gotten lots of messages this year about, you are exactly where you're meant to be. Everything that is happening for a purpose, so just remember that and keep on pushing through, right? And I think, I told Ben this morning, it's like, it's already there that we're expecting that it could be any time for my grandfather. My aunt used to be a hospice nurse, and she said she'd be really surprised if he's still here at Thanksgiving. And I've kind of been leaning that way myself. But different things that I've been seeing along the way with universal direction, all that fun stuff. And of course, there's the concern that my grandma will be not too far behind. There have been times when I have even wondered, because she got sick, she had a really bad cold, or maybe, I don't know if it was just a cold or what was going on with her. But she basically, she flat out told my mom that she was going to be at home for a couple of days and not to have anybody bother her. And there's that point where I had the thought come up where it's like, is she trying to do something as well, and doesn't want anybody checking on her, just leave her alone kind of a thing. I totally appreciate the fact that she would want, time to herself because she's not gotten a lot of it in my lifetime. And so I can totally see where she would want any of that. But then at the same time, my aunt and I went out for breakfast the other morning, and when we went over to her house, it's like, we're going to find her? How's this going? Because when we had gone, we dropped Gracie off at school, and then we went down to this little restaurant in town. And when we went past, her curtains were still closed. She opens them when she's awake and up and moving. It's like, but luckily the curtains were open when we got there, so we were not as worried about it at that point in time. But it's still one of those things, like, you never know. So, yeah. But what I was telling Ben was, obviously, death is something that's a big focus, or it's in everybody's thoughts at this point in time, and it's just a matter of when, not if so much. But yeah, it's there, and I've told him I feel like when I came home and it was the bird, it gave me this sort of realization that maybe I needed to soften my view of things, and come from a little more compassionate. I know that is something that I've struggled with my grandfather, and I've talked about that in many videos, and then there's that whole point where literally my entire life has been consumed with him obsessing over his death, and I feel like for a long time it just felt like everything was death, and that was the focus, that was his focus, that was everybody's focus, because he kept putting it out there. Like, anytime there was any kind of celebration or anything, we would always get switched around to talking about his death, and that was a whole thing in and of itself, and there's been some hurt feelings over the years, and I'm realizing a lot more plays into all of those things, and I think another thing I told Ben this morning was, we expect it with him. We've expected it with him, that it could be at any point for a very long time, and I feel like because that's been a consuming point in my life, it's been kind of hard to look at it with any kind of compassion, just because it's like, oh, we're doing this again. And like I have mentioned, my cousin that upset his mom because he told her, for 6 years I've been hearing my grandfather is dying, and you need to come and see him because he's going to be gone soon, and blah blah blah. He says, for 6 years I've been doing this, and I will leave work and everything else that I have going on to go check in with my grandfather, and he's still here. It's like, I get why she was upset with what he said, but I also absolutely get where he's coming from. And I feel like part of that goes back to that, little universe trying to make me more mindful of my outlook and how I am putting it out there as well. And then the fact that it came up with one of my birds first, again, well, two of my birds at this point, they're just kind of like, oh, not I feel like the holiday season is such a unfortunate time for it to be a legit possibility, but man, here we are. And I pulled some cards the other day, and two that popped out at me, I was pulling cards for the energy for the week, and there were three, and then these other two came out and landed face up like they were very much calling for my attention. And the first one was broken heart, and the second one, which was right directly underneath that one, was attachment. And honestly, when I read that, or when I saw them, my immediate thought was maybe that's a part of the week. Of course, that was Monday, and it is now Saturday. And just the conversation with the doctor, it's like, my mom asked me what I heard him say yesterday to kind of verify. She said he's not going to be here in a year. And I said, right. I said, what I took it as was that he's definitely not going to be around in a year, but there's too many variables that make it up in the air to give any kind of more substantial time frame, and what kind of immediacy we might be looking at or whatever. And yeah, so there's that. But another thing that I was thinking about this morning was, while it's been a struggle, like my entire life on this death end, I had a very unhealthy view of death for a very long time. And I'm seeing it more as, just a cycle of life. It's part of what happens here on Earth, right? No physical body lives forever. They're not meant to. The soul goes on, and I think that's kind of the bigger thing that I see as sad for him, I think, is just, that point where he spent his whole life, or spent my whole life anyway, obsessing over his death, which his mom died at 44, so it makes sense that it would be a looming point if he doesn't heal from it, and he obviously hasn't. And so there's the part where everybody's been affected by it in some kind of way, but at the same time, today I'm looking at it and I feel like, in a way, it's also a gift, because I've spent my whole life watching him obsess over this thing that's a natural part of life, to the point where he hasn't bothered to live his life at all. And I'm at least able to see and know I don't want that for myself. And a lot of the decisions that I've made over the years, but especially more recently, have been because I don't want to just perpetuate that cycle, and keep the fear of death alive. It's especially since I have been learning that there is so much more going on than, just the day-to-day mundane stuff that everybody gets lost in so easily. But there's that. Yeah. I woke up at 3:30 this morning. Of course, fed the dogs. But I also spent 2.5 hours writing. And actually, I wanted to share that because I feel like this stuff that I was writing this morning is largely helpful for, like, the stuff I was connecting with when I was talking to Ben this morning. So it's long, sorry, but I'm also realizing why the writing side of things has been so critically important, because, it's as my head doesn't shut off, then I just pick up pen and notebook and just start writing, and whatever comes to mind. I don't edit myself on these, unless I will catch spelling stuff if I'm like writing too quickly and just happen to be like, oh, that's the wrong use of there. It happens. But yeah, so I'm just gonna read it. Okay, it says, one of my most important missions in life is to show people we already do have the answers within us. We already know what we're here to do, and we are always guided from within. Not everyone is on a twin flame journey. That'd be redundant if we all came to learn the same lesson. Our souls are here to learn different variations to things, so we aren't here for the same thing. I am on the twin flame journey because I am someone who has always been pulled by love. To me, love is the most important lesson, and to get to love, I've had no trouble navigating through the deepest, darkest depths of myself to get there. On that note, it's once I was aware of, the fact that there is this twin flame thing, that's always been a big component of my life path and my purpose for being here, and what I was learning, until I realized that, hey, he actually is a person. And he does exist at this point in time. Which always made sense somewhere out there, but yet I was never able to connect with it when I didn't know who he was and all that stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, to me, love is the most important lesson, and to get to love, I've had no trouble navigating through the deepest, darkest depths of myself to get there. This is also why it has been so very important for me to learn to trust myself and follow the breadcrumbs, if you will. Some of us have come with the very important role of clearing out and transmuting the densities of the earth, because so many people have been stuck in them, buying into the false light, and being these obstacles preventing us from navigating the way forward. The church is the false light. Religion has done more at preventing the masses from finding the light than helping us get there. Although that in and of itself is a paradox, because the very means they've used to preventing it is the very thing people like me have come to navigate through. They've known the next round of people coming to bring the Christ light was women, so they've done their absolute best to squash women in all ways, to teach us that we must be submissive and quiet partners, and that we need someone to guide us. The problem with that is they wholly ghosted us and tried to take away our value and importance. Entire civilizations have been destroyed in attempts to keep the feminine detached from spirit, so we've been born into societies where it's deemed right and acceptable to treat people badly. The distorted masculine, without his feminine counterbalance, has long been cruel and unruly, slaughtering whole groups of people to throw his weight around and keep people in the subservience to him. But the divine masculine, the one who has learned to embrace the feminine within himself, his emotions, his softness, the divine masculine is gentle yet safe and protective. He doesn't look to abuse even the distorted feminine, because he knows that's not who he is. The divine feminine rules in the upper chakras. She is the connection to the divine, and she is in all of us. The divine masculine rules in the lower chakras. He helps us to be grounded and stable and ensures that we are safe and protected, and he too is in all of us. We are here to bring the polarities of ourselves into balance. Only when they are in balance can we be in our own divinity, and that is found in uniting our own polarities in the heart space. God is love, love is God, love is all there is. Throughout time, the distorted masculine has been abusing the distorted feminine. There was that whole Salem witch trials thing. Actual historical medical practices taught the distorted feminine was somehow less of a person and came with various ways to keep her in distortion, to demonize her body in menstruation and make a natural process of shedding away the old way of being as dirty. Old treatments for women's mental problems such as hysteria could be treated by medical professionals assaulting women by bringing them to orgasm in a medical facility, while culture taught that sex for recreation purposes was a sin. And yet the very fact that a medical professional could bring about her arousal as treatment for some bogus condition served to keep the feminine in distortion. First, because she has some condition she needs treatment for, but then because the treatment would be seen as sinful in if her marriage bed was safe and unselfish enough to allow for her orgasm. And as she was pushed further and further into distortion, she was further demonized by the distorted masculines, pushing her buttons and keeping her from feeling safe, because in their polarity, everything is up on its head rather than safe for all. The darkness comes when the light has forgotten itself. Distortion kept us in duality. Distortion kept us in the darkness. Distortion allowed us to abuse each other time and time again. Women are taught in distortion to fear men, that to be safe and to be taken care of, they have to find a good man to marry and have kids with and be protected by, lest bad men come to abuse them in various ways. Men are taught in distortion that emotions are bad and getting help is a sign of weakness, because if they were in connection to their emotions, they wouldn't be able to excuse the abuses of the feminine, and they would rise into their protective nature, and the systems keeping us in distortion to begin with wouldn't be able to exist. In distortion, we are locked into our past traumas and unable to reach our united heart space. The system of distortion, which has killed billions throughout time, can only exist by keeping us locked into distortion and separation. Yet literally all we have to do is turn within and be led from the heart space, which we can only do by uniting our inner feminine and inner masculine. So much of my life I've searched for love. I knew there was one person I was meant to be with, and that ours would be this hugely magical connection with much love, romance, and even balance. I wanted a love that would be unmistakable, one that set us apart and made others want what we have for themselves, not to be made jealous and contaminate our beautiful connection with negativity, but to see that such a pure and true love does exist so that it can be attainable for them as well. I just didn't realize he would be an aspect of me, and so I long searched outside of myself. I always knew he would have brown eyes and brown hair, and that he would be in music. I kept trying to find him outside of myself, and within the frame of reference the world kept imposing upon me, I tried to find him in someone older than me, as though his wisdom would come from a numerical value, yet the ones I kept being swayed to were always younger overall. I now realize because a part of me, that heart-centered part that is he, was always trying to get me closer to him in the physical plane. He knew who I was looking for because he already and always has been with me, trying to guide me if only I'd let him. Now, of course, for me, it is he, but that is not to enforce the idea that the church had it right in their undying committal to only a man and only a woman can have this thing. For my love and I, this is how our physical forms are because of those ideologies within the religious context, because that will not be a point of contention on how the religious types know we are bad and fit their standard on that point, so we can help those who don't fit the zealous ideology to have space and know their existence is not to be demonized. The divine doesn't come through duality. Duality is just a means of helping us to realize that we are already whole within, and only through finding our wholeness, our divinity within, can we start moving to bring wholeness to all of us, and not just some of us who appear to fit some inane standard. Our story is he and she, so we cannot be immediately written off because of a silly standard that serves no real purpose other than to keep people divided from within. But that silly standard and the division it causes, keeping those split from within, is also the very thing that brings in more and more of the thing, so that our divine collective can more thoroughly understand the split in the various ways in which it keeps us split. The darkness only comes from the light forgetting itself. So if we were born into that space of having forgotten in order to find understanding on the topic, only those who found their own light, i.e. not those masquerading as false light by pointing fingers to the bringer of light they accept but refusing to do their own healing work. Those of us who've done the healing work and know the scary things that lurk in the space of forgetting who we are can shine a light, or rather hold a mirror up for them to realize they are their own light. The beauty is, the sheer fact that some of us have done the healing work for ourselves serves to do the work for the whole. So as we find our own light, it does indeed shine light for others to realize their own light as well. The sun's coming at us, I'm talking about this. This journey is my purpose. I can share the discoveries I'm making at a time that I don't have you with me in the physical, but yet I have the details to share of who you are to show that I knew this stuff all along because it is knowable by turning within and connecting to the heart space. The twin flame journey was relevant for me to be able to get there despite all the darkness I encountered in various ways in my life. Others will know what we have is untouchable and unshakable because it came first from finding each other within, which we could only do if love was the single most forward driving force for us to keep going despite all of the darkness. Connecting in the 3D space initially just kick-started us into a higher awareness that there's so much more going on here. But we could only be drawn together if we released the density and the dark, scary stuff that's been keeping us apart. Even the darkness exists only out of love. It is merely a reference point, and it is only the light forgetting itself. And the point of forgetting is so that we can come back into a state of remembering if only we choose to. I had to start sharing the story I had back when I was starting out because the very process of sharing my story has been what's clearing out the density for me. Sharing my story along the way has been so hugely critical to the journey because it shows the difficulty while also making it clear that it is possible. Yes, it is hard. It hurts. I've cried a ton. But even that was a means of showing me clearing out space and being driven by love on this elusive twin flame journey, which has been made to be bullshit by those who know deep down that the twins are here for the sole purpose of ushering in an era of love. If the masses deem it to be frivolous or bullshit, surely that will keep the twins from being able to light the way into love, right? Love is all there is. I also think it's funny that my two closest friends that I'll be spending time with today were looking at me all sideways when I started talking about my twin flame journey last year. Of course, one had watched the Netflix documentary and found it sketchy because of that. The other could only go from what people in her polyamory group had said of it, many of which probably watched the documentary. Neither of them have given a shit about my YouTube stuff, although Roxy at least applauds me for my efforts on doing the big scary thing, because it did force me to dig deeper into myself in order to do and keep coming back to keep doing. I think she can at least tell that I have changed in some way, even if maybe she isn't fully aware of what it is about me that's changed just yet. My family has gotten to experience more of the growing pains of the process. I've said a lot of things along the way that haven't been appreciated, especially the whole sharing of the hard stuff anyway. They will be horrified at first whenever they do find out about this YouTube thing. But I'm not here to ruin them, even if that's what they feared in the deep energetic spaces. I'm here to help others heal, and that takes confronting toxic systems in all their toxicity and distortion and shining a light into them to be seen for what they are. I was also thinking about how much Aaron Dowdy and Victor Odo have been huge on my journey, but now I'm unfollowing some of their stuff and paying less attention to what comes across my YouTube, unless it really strikes me and makes me want to watch or read what they have going on. Aside from that, I don't need any more coaching on how to be a coach. Ayahuasca isn't for me, even if it's mainly because I haven't had the money to go on a retreat along the way. They were huge on helping me start my journey, Vic especially, as he was the one that kept appearing when I was trying to learn more about what it meant to be an empath, which I only learned because of some heavy military experiences, some of which faded out as soon as I was removed from the environment in which they'd taken place in. Then I only heard it labeled as empath, as such during a hospital chaplaincy internship, and it still took a few more years before I was able to see myself as one and eventually try to learn more about it. Then Aaron came up at a time when I was ready to start learning more about spirituality and opening up to meditation, which helped me to be able to connect with my journey in even deeper layers. Religion would have had me believe that meditation is bad because anything that brings up the possibility of going further into the darkness before being able to find the light was deemed bad or counterproductive at best. However, meditation is simply a vehicle that brings up parts of the shadow in order that it can be witnessed and healed. If you're buying into a system whose very nature is to prevent individual healing by hiding beneath one individual's having healed, of course you're going to think it's bad and avoid it at all costs. Another criticism I've heard of it recently was that it distorts a person's view of what's real. Well, duh, because the 3D is very much not real. It's all a divine dream so we can learn more about who we are and the role we play in the grand scheme of things. Realizing reality isn't real is what allows us to step into higher levels of being so that we can be much more of who we are and who and what we came here to be. Only then can we truly live. All my good thoughts are in the early morning hours. Yeah, but I've been thinking a lot lately, like when I started unfollowing some of the people that I started following along the way, as I was finding more teachers and learning more about these things. I also kept having these like messages when I was reading my cards and stuff that would pop up saying at some point, the teacher becomes, or the student becomes the teacher, right? So at some point you have to set aside the books and the things you've learned from books and from what others have said in order to figure out how your own story plays in with what you've learned, and okay, like I said a lot in that little reading bit that, the darkness comes when the light's forgotten itself. And that's something I've heard multiple people say, but especially on I think Twin Flames 11:11 or maybe Magnetize Yourself. I've heard it from a couple different places along the way. And then I've talked before about I watched her tarot reading that Nordic Light Tarot did, and she was talking about it's like you've left pieces of yourself scattered around the world and you're on a journey to reclaim those pieces. And I started thinking about like all the rocks and stuff that I wear and how, most of them are for, my ones that I go to first are for grounding and shielding my energy. But then also, blue ones are for the throat chakra, and those are to help be able to use your voice, which that's always been one of my biggest things that I've struggled with, right? So like I got sodalite, labradorite, celestite, blue kyanite, more blue kyanite, angelite, and then I got some more on this side, the amazonite. I think that's the only one for the voice aspect. Oh, I got my little pinky ring, my Larimar. And aquamarine. Every water sign needs some aquamarine. I've heard that seems completely relevant. But I look at how that I felt scattered my entire life, and then I've been finding these things that have been helping me feel less scattered, especially the grounding stuff. Okay, what do I got for grounding? Today we got some black aura, hypersthene, bronzite, citrine is, it's yellow, but it's still lower chakras. That's then we got over here, if I can get my sleeve up, we got 2 sweatshirts on, so it's kind of chilly, and a dog hair. That's helpful. Okay, tourmalinated quartz, black moonstone, larvacite, tiger's eye, and then onyx, some obsidian, more tiger's eye, and what else do I got? Oh, this is another obsidian necklace, Shiva lingam, bloodstone, red jasper, mookite jasper. I already said Shiva lingam, I think. I feel like there's more. But those are, I got more onyx in my nose. Yeah. Oh, and peach moonstone. That's for that. Oh, and I have a whole bunch of rocks in my pocket too. But it's funny because I've been collecting these rocks, and when I was taking the classes at Inner Path, Lenita said, whatever you feel drawn to, there is a reason for it, and just go with it. You'll find out later. And that's pretty much what it's been. And then when I watched that tarot reading, and she's talking about going on a journey to find the pieces of yourself that you've scattered around the world, it's like, you know what? That makes perfect sense if you think that we are all aspects of the divine. And, it is, I know I personally, in my own journey, have spent a lot of time frustrated at the fact that I can't do all and be all and fix all by myself. And, it's been big, a big frustration. But, got funky things happening with the lighting now. Try to come over here. But that makes perfect sense. And as I'm thinking about, or as I've been thinking about it, I've written this a few times. I'll also just make note that book number 7 here, that is a really badly written 7, but it is a 7. Bright ideas with my Halloween stickers because we were in the season. I finished that last night, or this morning. So now I'm ready for book 8. And we're still not done with the year, so hey. But there's lots of things that I've been learning and coming to understand. But on that point about leaving yourself scattered, it's like, that makes perfect sense, because no one person is here to be able to do all and be all themselves. We work best in collaboration, and those that we can connect with for some shared purpose. It's like there are other people out there, like, okay, one of these days maybe I'll find somebody to help me with the technological aspect of this, and maybe like some editing kind of stuff, because I don't do any of that stuff, because I don't know how to do that stuff. And I really don't have the attention span or want to care to learn to do it and to make that be a whole thing. So there's that. But, it's like finding people that you can exchange gifts with. So like maybe I find somebody that can help me on the technological side of things, and I don't know, maybe I don't know. It's like, I don't want to say I don't know what I do, because one of the things I'm here to do is to teach some of this stuff that I'm starting to connect and understand. And I've always known that that's kind of been one of my big purposes, and yet at the same time, it's taken me a long time to get here. But alas, we are here doing the thing and trying to make something of it anyway. And I think that's a big part of, I talked in, I think, the last video about the long game, and how, one of the things that has continued to come up for me is the idea that this is a slow build. And it takes me a lot of, it's, okay, in a year, I have 12 subscribers. Not because I'm just completely uninteresting, but because I have all this stuff going on at levels that I haven't figured out how to make better use of in the real world and in my everyday existence. And I know that there's been so much, or there is so much, and I think partly because the teaching end of things, but also like, the fact that my voice has been such a huge thing for me to navigate around, and there's been so much trauma in using my voice and not being able to use my voice. And then it was really hard learning to trust myself, because this is what I've always been meant to do, but it's really hard to just start doing. And I think a big part of the reason for that is because very much because the stuff that I am making sense of, most people, it's not even on their radar at this point in time, and not that it won't be. Like, okay, like Aaron and Vic, since I talked about them, they have been around for a while, doing their niche stuff, and putting out content, and at a time I was ready for what they had to teach me. I found them and I was able to connect with their content and learn and grow and be able to make a bunch of connections for myself. So it's one of those things, it's like, next step is not to continue to need the coaches and everything. Eventually you start putting it into the world from your own perspective, your own voice, and what you have to share, and the people who will eventually resonate with that and will be at a time that they need it will find it, and that's like that Bashar thing I talked about the other day. The people who you're not a vibrational match with or for will not find your stuff. It's just the ones who are a match to something you have to say, and it might not be everything you have to say, but a lot of the stuff is so like crazy out there in this world where we want stuff we can see and hold on to and all that stuff, and well, you can't do that with spirit's kind of elusive on that end. But making sense of things and finding ways to bring it down to make it understandable, I think that's where a lot of that comes in at for me. Of course, this, the whole writing thing, like even the whole painting my office thing, there was, every time I've gone to paint like on canvas, there's always been a span of time where I had to hey, quit that. I have to get so much chaos out of my system before I can wind it down into something that makes sense. And I think that's why it's been so critically important for me to get a regular writing practice going on. Like, I was at a factory last year when I started being able to follow through on writing more, and I don't know if I might still have the journal I was writing in at that time, or I might have ripped some pages out and repurposed it, because when I started in January, it's like not fully blank slate kind of a thing, but at the same time kind of, because it was to focus on like the twin flame part of the journey and what it was teaching me. And then I'm realizing that it's all woven together so deeply that no wonder I can't just, oh, here it is. I mean, not that I can't do that. I can do that, but it's usually not, the stuff that comes up isn't like it might not necessarily look connected to anything until I start talking in circles and finding where it fits. And then it's like, oh, that's how that goes there. Got it. Yeah, but like, yeah, even like that bit that I wrote about this morning with like talking about the distorted masculines, like I feel like that's kind of been the space that my grandfather has been in, and feeling this morning like I have more compassion toward his journey and what he's been through in his lifetime, because I'm now able to see how it's forced me to step into a higher part of myself that, I like, even the stuff with my ex-husband that I've talked about here on a bunch. I'm beyond the point of regretting anything that happened, because I realize now that this higher version of me that I'm finally starting to embrace and step into more and more, that doesn't exist without somebody bringing me down into the depths of myself and making me confront the darkest aspects of my belief systems and who I thought I was, and realizing that all the stuff I thought I was all along, I wasn't. I was just under the influence of the way the 3D world works. And in order to move beyond that, there's a lot of healing involved. And that healing journey would not have existed had it not been for this twin flame aspect of it for me to come up, and that's one of those things where, like, going back to the learning to trust myself, because most people that I talk to about this guy, since I don't actually know him in person, and we've connected one time on social media a couple times on social media, once in which he responded, the other I was just a fly on the wall. And feeling that energetic shift in that whole thing, yeah, that's been a whole thing in and of itself. But yeah, like, trusting myself. A big part of what I talk about on here has been, the twin flame and what I know of him. And since I don't know him personally, there's only so much I do know. But, like, okay, the frame of reference for, let me figure out, okay, it's 2:00. At some point soon, I need to go to hang out with my friends. I'm supposed to be at Bona's at 3, but she hasn't gotten back to me what her address is. It is now 2, so I don't know if I'm going to be connecting with her or not, or just maybe I'll just go up to Kokomo. But then if I do that, I'm pretty sure she's not going to go up there and meet us. She'll probably back out or something, but she hasn't said anything, so I don't know what's happening. But anyway, like, I was on a dating app back around 2020, and in that time I had to set, the parameters for what I was okay with, like, on somebody that I would be interested in dating, right? So when it came to age, and, I'd have, like, the, mind you, see, what was I in 2020, like 37, 36, 37, that time frame. When I had, like, a 24-year-old contact me, it's like, I don't think I can go that young. Nope. Just what I know of mental and emotional development and all that fun stuff. With my psychology background, and that was just, at that point in time, it's like, how much younger would I be willing to go? Well, then I had this thought that came to mind where I said I didn't think I could date anybody younger than 5 years, 5 years younger than me. Well, it would make sense for my twin flame to be 5 years younger, because this point, but also because, my my school mascot growing up was a dragon, and we had a band show in 2000 that was a year of the dragon, because that was the year of the dragon. And I made the connection that since dragons seem to be important on this path as well, 5 years younger than me would be 1988, and which 8s are important because, well, I mean, I love repeating numbers mainly, but if he was born in August of 88, then there's 888, and that would make perfect sense too, for other reasons that I put out there, but 888 is a big one. But also, 1988 was the year of the dragon too. So it's like, okay. And it's like, these kind of things are the thing that I'm here to pull together, and look how connected things really are. It's like, it didn't seem like it way back when, but now it does. and so, there's that whole thing. And what's another one? Oh, I mentioned in one of my recent videos that when I was with my ex, he was not really he liked dogs and was okay with having dogs, but he really wanted a dog that was going to dote on him without having to put in the effort with bonding and all that fun stuff. So when it came to the 3 dogs that I have, he was always kind of jealous of them and didn't like that they got so much of my attention because I knew they were protecting me and I did not feel energetically safe with him, and I'm confident they did not feel energetically safe with him either. We're gonna have to go home here shortly. I think Zeva's got a potty. But anyway, when I left, I put out the thought that I wanted somebody that... hold on. Okay, so let me just wrap this that story up, because Zeva just puked on the floor. So ew. At least I can hit it with the hose and we'll be all right. Anyway, because there was so much contention with the dogs, with that connection. I remember saying at some point that I wanted somebody who loved dogs as much as I do, and universe had this be more specific kind of moment, and it showed me this guy with the Asher house that I talked about, and it's like, I love everything this guy does. I love how much he loves his dogs and all that stuff. It's like, man, that's a lot of dogs. It's like, not quite that much. So it's like the universe or your heart. Let's go with your heart. Will guide you along the way for what you really want, and will help you to kind of navigate through the big questions and what do you want. And okay, if you're not specific enough, well, let's show you this thing, and okay, now what do you think? And so that was a big thing. But also, okay, like I followed this couple, Carlo and Sarah, on YouTube for a while, and like just some of their videos pop up. It's like, oh, they're cute together and that kind of a thing. And I remember at like some random point being like, maybe I should find an Italian dude. And I was like, okay, well, with some specifications there, it's like, I don't want to deal with the language barrier issue. So preferably somebody that speaks fluent English and has been around for, maybe a couple generations in the States and that kind of a thing. But it's like, just like weird things like that have come up that I've got to process through. And, now I'm connecting back, and it's like, oh wait, I bet that's going to be related to this whole thing, isn't it? And okay, points that I can't change along the way. Like my first serious boyfriend from back in high school. I dated him from my sophomore year in high school, and when we broke up for the last time, sophomore year in undergrad. And his little brother has this guy's name, right? So this name has been following me around. There was a kid my mom babysat, and his dad had variations of the name. The guy I dated, his younger brother, had this name. And I remember very specifically thinking, that seems like an awfully big name for this little kid. And did not have any nicknames, so that was kind of weird. There's been a ton of characters in TV shows that have come up along the way, or actors, or friends of family members of friends. Like, it's everywhere. It's one of those that is just literally everywhere. And there was a girl when I was in undergrad and was in Bible study. And she was married to a Marine by the same name, and every time she said his name, I got this like overwhelming swoony feeling. It's like, what the hell is that all about? And I remember this moment of thinking, what is it about that name? You know, because it seemed very specifically with that name, you know. And then, okay, after me and the high school boyfriend broke up that last time, he ended up dating a girl that was in my dorm, the same hallway, but she was on the 3rd floor and I was on the 1st floor. It's like, so I ended up seeing this guy a lot too. But she had an older brother who also had this name, you know, and for a brief span of time, I convinced myself I had a crush on this dude, and I think it was mainly that name piece, but he was, you know, red hair, blue eyes, he definitely was not what I knew I was looking for, but because I didn't realize that, hey, there are some specifics here that I'm being guided toward along the way, you know, but those names, I can't make those up. So, you know, the fact that they exist and the fact that I can talk about these people, these specific people who've had the name, and, you know, okay, my ex-husband's son's older brother, who's his half brother, he had this name and his dad had this name, you know, and it's like specific people I can point out that I know of that have this guy's name, and how, you know, that was kind of where I realized that this name has literally been following me around my entire life, you know. And while I'm not saying it on here, you know, I have said specifically who they're connected to so we can go back and find them, you know. And I think that, like, that's a big part of the journey and, like, what I'm doing here too, is because I do have these details and I am willing to be brave enough to put them out there so that one day when all that finally works out, then people can go back and say, hey, she's not completely full of shit. Because right now, while I haven't met him in person, I mean, it sounds like I'm kind of full of shit. And that's been one of the biggest pieces where it's been so critically important that I'm learning how to trust myself, and follow through with what I know, even if it sounds silly or I have nothing else to go off of, because I do have stuff to go off of. The universe has been guiding me all along the way and always from within, you know. And, you know, I got 7 of these bad boys, and it's just been my journey. And I have talked of him specifically, like the one who real world existence, who it is, and a few of them, you know, and making all the connections. And while I'm not just publishing my journals along the way, I will compile this stuff eventually to make it make sense in story form and like more without all the fluff of trying to navigate other things too. When I finally have pared it down enough that I understand how connected it is and how everything, you know, has been guiding me on this journey, which is why I have to trust myself, because nobody else is on my journey. But if I'm brave enough to vocalize the stuff that I have been, eventually, when, you know, okay, I've mentioned on here before, like, he had to have, like, real person twin flame had to have some kind of platform out there. It'd be some kind of spotlight, because I had to be able to find him. But at the same time, you know, that took me to a point of how was he going to be able to find me? And that alone, that point, is why I started this whole YouTube thing. And I wouldn't have been, you know, like the girl in my dream that said you have to start sharing the story you already have to tell before more of your mission will be made clear, because I've had to release it. And a lot of, like, the crying that I've done on here and the frustrations that I've expressed. You know, I've had to navigate this stuff, real world, real time existence, and knowing that right now this is all about building the foundation for something like way bigger and way more magical than I even really understand, I think. But we'll get there. You know, and then, you know, another part of like him having some kind of spotlight, because this is one of those things where I did not start this to try to get the spotlight. I did not initially. I started this because I was trying to follow the whims that, you know, were the divinely inspired whims to get me to where I needed to be. And that has been the healing process. And I've had to, you know, not be afraid to air my dirty laundry, because even though like my family will be horrified when they find out some of the stuff I've talked about on here, when it comes down to it, once this goes where it's meant to go, which is going to be kind of everywhere, you know, and go, even that point, like I've talked on here several times about my, my Uranus conjunct my Venus in Leo, and you know, the little messages I get on the Pattern app talking about you're not somebody who can be ignored, and it's like, yeah, I'm bright and colorful. I am my own art project, you know, and I, you know, the way I dress, you know, I talked back in June, and said that I think part of what I'm supposed to do at this point in time is just go out and be seen as much as possible, because energetically it's kind of like a tap on the shoulder and, hey, what you doing? You know, kind of a thing. But like, nobody thinks to pay any attention to, I mean, they're going to pay some kind of attention, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily trying to be in your face, aside from this appearance thing. And that's not trying to be in your face. That's just kind of how I how I am on Bright and Colorful, and like to put as much of that out into the world, you know. But when it comes around, and it's going to be basically because he already has some kind of spotlight, and then basically he is giving me a hand up, which energetically he's been doing my entire life. You know, he's always been with me in the energetic spaces, you know, and I just didn't, you know, I just kept trying to talk myself out of it. Like, there were things that I knew that I didn't know how I knew, but it also seemed like everything took a really long time to come around. Like, when I knew, or when I realized, I had that knowing that Tyler would die in our mid-30s, and it would be his death that brought our group back together for a time. And also that it would be after his death that I started to make sense of things. And I would be 40 before I really started making sense of everything in my life. And here we are. But, you know, when I had this knowing at 18, 19 years old, however I was back then, obviously there's no way to know that's for sure going to happen until it happens. And that was many years before it happened. So how can I be so sure, right? And that's the point. That's the point of learning this, or learning of me going on my path and making these connections, is so I can share them, and so people will eventually be able to realize that, oh yeah, maybe she did know something. You know, but it's not easy. It's not been easy at all. The hardest part has been coming around on using my voice and being able to put like the heart stuff out there, because like this twin flame thing, you know, it's hugely kept me moving on this path, because I had to get ready to be ready for whatever's going to come of it. But at the same time, that's taken a lot of trust, and because that too, I think, okay, 2019 was when I left my ex for the last time and pushed the divorce through. And I think it was also when he did some stuff in that year that I've heard of that will later be relevant. Well, that I'll later share, but it's relevant. And then I had that dream where Tyler said he's coming, but I didn't know he said he's coming until the past few months. It's like, oh, now it's like, it's making, oh my God, it makes so much more sense. And there's so many more levels to it and deeper layers of it, And then I think back to like that Natural Mystic video that I watched where she talked about how, she said something about the healing process and, like there's some kind of connection and it activates the divine feminine into her healing process, and she's healing in the heart space. But then that she said who knows what he's doing or whatever. And then I had that dream, which is the one where the girl told me I needed to start sharing the story that I already have to share back in March. And another, like the bigger part of the dream was, it's like I was crawling into this room on like one of those comfort runner mats. Universe is trying to make it okay, or trying to pad the way for me, even though I'm like crawling through, trying to hide from everybody in the process, right? And he comes in crawling from another direction. I saw 11111 as I'm talking about that. But he comes crawling in from another direction, also on one of these little comfort mat things. And as soon as we come together and are like, we're up and running, it's like figuring it out from there, but then we got to like this other point and it was like he seemed to age backwards in front of me, and I just took that to mean that he wasn't ready yet, but he's getting there. So like there's a whole bunch of things. So yeah, so that's a big thing. But anyway, I'm supposed to go hang out with my friends here in a little bit, even though I have not heard about where I'm supposed to go, so I might just skip Indy and go straight to Kokomo. But we'll see. Anyway. Yeah, so that's what I got for today. And yeah. Look at how cute he is. He's just like, what the hell are you doing, Mom? Why are we here? We gonna go somewhere yet? You still got puke on the floor. Anyway, yeah. This is the point of like this whole YouTube thing, and it's taken a long time before I get here. And like I said, the time is going to matter. It's not in the 12 subscribers I've gotten in my first year of doing this thing. It's when basically I get the hand up into the world I was always meant to be in, but I just had to work through some stuff before I could get there. And then people are like, wait, who's she? How'd she get with him, kind of a thing. Then it's going to matter. And then people will be finding my stuff and finding that I've been talking about him specifically all along the way, and like those details haven't changed, like the high school boyfriend's little brother. And if I just said characters on TV shows, I could change that stuff. Those details with actual specific people, can't change who those were. And right now it doesn't matter who they were. Those real life people, they weren't the point anyway. The point was the name and how it's been following me. And only when we actually do meet, and then people can track or can care to track back these details that I've put out there, then it'll be a little more relevant and whatnot and interesting, and that is what I'm totally on board for. I used to pray that my life would be used in a big way. I just didn't really understand exactly what that meant. You know, we did the prayer of Jabez thing when I was in high school, and oh man, that whole thing. It's like I feel like I'm lining up with that and a whole bunch of other stuff, so that I also ask for. So anyway, need to go figure out what I'm doing, and hey, quit, Taz. Get the dogs out of the car so I can clean that mat up and all that fun stuff. As always, I appreciate you, and until the next time, see ya.